In this video, we're going to take a look at 4 different ways that we can make a quality education more accessible and more affordable. The cost of education has been rising over the past few years, where we're seeing the price of tuition increase more than inflation. And this means that education might seem more out of reach for more people. We know that education is a key factor in the ability to participate more fully in the workforce and in society. So is there anything that we can do in order to get a quality education at a reasonable cost? Well, we're going to look at 4 ways that we can. 4 ways that we can reduce the cost of education and learning. You may have heard of some of these, and you might be doing some of these already. You might be surprised what's possible. First, let's take a look at lowering the cost of the hardware that we might use to connect and create. In today's world, a lot of our teaching and a lot of our learning will use digital devices, such as laptops, mobile phones, computers, and tablets in order to share information and to engage in learning. For many people, though, the cost of these devices is a barrier to participation in learning. And the good news is that over the past few years, high-quality devices that are useful have become available at a much lower cost than ever before. For example, we have these small, inexpensive computers such as the Raspberry Pi. These little devices are incredibly versatile. They run Linux, so you can run the Pi Linux on here. It's a full-featured operating system. There are hundreds and hundreds of applications that run on here. Not only that, they also have a pinout array on them so that you can extend out and learn things like robotics, and you can learn things like electronics. There is a lot you can do with these devices, and they're very reasonably priced. They even have sort of a pre-built all-inclusive version called the Pi 400, the Pi 500. This has everything you need. You just have to connect it to a TV or a monitor, and you have your keyboard, your mouse, your power, everything you need right in that box. And best of all, the Raspberry Pi Foundation offers a huge amount of support for teachers and educators to give their students different projects that they can work on. Computer projects, electronic projects, all sorts of different projects that go even beyond STEM. They're able to do a ton of things with these Raspberry Pis. We also have low-cost inclusive laptops such as Chromebooks. These are far less expensive than a traditional laptop, but they offer all of the things that you would expect to be able to do with a laptop. They have the built-in keyboard, the built-in screen, audio, video, everything that you would need. You can work with productivity apps, you can do internet research, you can take online courses, you can do a lot of things with these Chromebooks. They do require an internet connection, so that does become an issue, but stay tuned for a tip where I talk about that a little bit more. In many cases, a Chromebook is a perfect solution for low-cost learning. And there was a time where older used computers generally had run through their life cycle. They weren't very useful, but now we live in a time where older computers can be still very useful for basic computing tasks and learning. They are great for internet connectivity, web-based applications, and general usage. And one of my favorite ways to recycle and reuse computers are these Apple Mac mini systems. They can often be bought at very reasonable prices, and the older ones can even be upgraded in terms of memory and storage. And this makes them very useful as a lower cost alternative to buying a brand new system. This is especially true if you don't need to run the latest applications, or you're using them primarily for productivity applications, internet connectivity. You can even put alternate operating systems like Linux on them. Once we have some hardware that we can use to connect and create, we then need content. And unfortunately, this is an area that can get quite expensive quite quickly. But did you know there's an entire movement to make educational content completely free? The second way that we can save money on getting a quality education is to look for something called OER resources. OER stands for Open Educational Resources. These resources are freely available teaching and learning and research materials that can be used and adapted and shared with others with either no or limited restrictions. Many of these resources have open licenses, such as those provided by the Creative Commons, and OER is based upon a concept called the 5 Rs, where we can retain, reuse, revise, remix, and redistribute the content. Using this resource and OER resources is especially important in areas of low income or low educational access. When we talk about access to educational resources, it's important to not only think of wealthy countries, but of the entire globe. And that's why I'd like to draw your attention to an initiative by the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, known as UNESCO. UNESCO has identified quality education as one of 17 Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. These Sustainable Development Goals were adopted by all of the United Nations member states back in 2015, and they provide a blueprint for peace and prosperity for all the people on the planet, now and into the future. Abbreviated as SDGs, access to a quality education is known as SDG 4. Being related to education and learning, it's something that I'm absolutely passionate about and something that I'm very interested in. The ability to provide quality education to everyone, no matter where they live or the circumstances they live in, is something that I believe has a huge impact on the future of the planet. UNESCO's Education 2030 is a mechanism to support global cooperation to help achieve progress towards these goals. It's very interesting to see what's happening when it comes to providing education across a wide variety of environments to a wide variety of people. Good quality educational practices for one group of people is often good educational practice for many. The UNESCO website has many excellent resources to explain, support, and provide opportunities to participate in SDG 4, and I'll leave a link in the description and I encourage you to check it out. It was while I was reading and watching some videos by UNESCO that I came across a third way to reduce educational costs: downloadable offline learning materials. In high-income countries, about 93% of the population has access to the internet. When you look at low-income countries, though, this number drops to 27% of the population. And this translates to roughly about 31.3% of the world's population, or 2.57 billion people, that don't have access to the internet. But the good news is that more and more people are getting connected to the internet. Approximately 144 million people last year gained access to the internet, but there are still cases where we need to have learning materials available and we can't access the internet. The solution is to download learning materials onto a relatively inexpensive device, such as the Raspberry Pi that I mentioned earlier. An example of doing this is Kiwix. It's an application that runs on Android, Linux, Mac OS, iOS, Windows, all of these operating systems, and it's even available as a Chrome, Firefox, and Edge extension. You can install it on a Raspberry Pi, for example, and you can use that to create an offline hotspot, which allows your Raspberry Pi to act as an accessible resource that contains the learning materials. So after your initial setup and you download these resources, you can then use your device as the hotspot that others can use to access those resources, eliminating the need for them to have an internet connection. This works well in areas with unstable internet connection or areas where data costs would be really prohibitive. The fourth way that we can save money and provide access to education is right here. You're watching this channel, and I suspect if you're watching a channel about education, learning, and technology, that I don't have to tell you about YouTube being a huge and vast library of educational content. I've been fortunate to make contact with other educational content creators here on the platform, and I've seen just how much support YouTube gives to these creators to support educational content on YouTube. By using YouTube with intention, looking for videos that teach, you can build your own playlists of content that helps you understand and learn new things. Education can take many forms, and YouTube most likely has someone creating content on the things that you would like to learn and that you would like to teach your students. We're fortunate to live in a time where access to technology that supports and provides access to learning is becoming more commonplace. The resources in this video are just the beginning of how we can find ways to reduce the cost of education and to make education more available. What are some of your favorite tools that are inexpensive, that help you with your teaching and with your learning? Technologies, resources, or even organizations that have helped you learn for less. Thank you so much for watching, and I do hope you'll check out the resources and especially the UNESCO website for the SDG 4 and all of the SDGs on how we can improve the planet and the future for everyone. We'll see you in the next video.